Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Balance and Riedel. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is my co-host, Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hey, John. How are you?
Good. We're right in the midst of the big iOS 11 release week, so we're both a little tired, but
just a little.
It's been kind of a crazy week. It's really nice, though, to get everything out there and be able to share everything we've been working with for 3 months with everybody in the world. So that's fun.
Despite the issues that we had on the first day, for the first few hours of the review on the site, the response is always rewarding to hear from people who are enjoying the review. And this time around, in addition to the ebook, which we always do for my iOS review, we also had the audiobook. And it's been fun to see people listening to the audiobook narrated by Mike Hurley. Listening to the audiobook in the car, or like just waiting at the doctor's office and listening to the review, or even I saw screenshots of someone reading the review and listening at the same time. So for the maximum experience. So that was fun.
We call that the total Ticci experience.
That is the full on Ticci.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I would encourage everybody to listen to Connected this week too, because you guys talk a lot about, I guess you finished up the topics on the keynote, but you also talked a little bit about Mike putting together the audiobook, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, it's been an entire process of having to change my schedule to work with another person who's doing something that is not blog related. So I had to work with a person who had to do narration, and narration has has different times, different schedules. Then I can polish a draft on the site until the very last minute. You cannot do the same with an audiobook, with narration, with a big audio file that has to be edited, and it's not like a plain text file. My entire review is a text file that weighs 300 kilobytes. And,
I know. I'm always amazed when I sync something up to our GitHub repo. It's like, oh, my article is only 7 kilobytes. I mean, it's tiny.
Yeah, it's super tiny, and it was interesting to work with someone who was doing a related project, but an entirely different kind.
Right.
If you haven't checked out the review, of course, check it out on MacStories, and if you're interested in an audio version, go check out the audiobook. We'll really appreciate it. And also, we should tell members of Club MacStories who are listening to this show that last week we uploaded the first episode of what we call App Stories Unplugged, which is a name that John came up with and that I fully endorse. And it's a special episode of App Stories. It's an extended version, a little more casual, when John and I are free to discuss things for more than 30 to 40 minutes. And it's available exclusively for Club MacStories members. So if you enjoy App Stories, if you happen to like also MacStories and ourselves and the work that we do, check out the first episode of App Stories Unplugged on the Club downloads page. It's fun. We talk about iOS 11, my review, and what it's like to have me as someone who assigns tasks to other people. And you can hear John going through a list of complaints about me. So that should be fun.
Yeah, John going to therapy with Federico, who's complaining about on the exact same podcast. Yeah, that was a little weird, but it was fun. I had a good time, and we're still friends, so we're doing all right.
Yeah, I think so. So, what is on our topic list today, John?
So today we're going to talk about some of the iOS 11 apps that we've seen, and we've talked about a little bit about this in the past, but there are so many that we've used over the summer, and in the last couple of days we've been blitzing the website with all sorts of reviews of the apps that we've been using. The whole team's been pitching in and putting stories up on the site. And Federico and I thought we would pick some of our favorites and talk about what we've seen and just go through a bunch of them, because there's a lot of interesting things coming out this week.
All right. You go first because I'm tired.
All right. So I know you are. So I'm gonna combine this one with one of the ones that's on your list, which is, I want to start with Working Copy, because Working Copy is an app that's critical to what we do every day at MacStories, right? That's how we collaborate on articles. When someone has something ready and someone else wants to look at it, make some edits, we push it to a GitHub repo. Basically, it's you have your own, and then you have one with each of the writers, and then various of us are members of each other's repos. So one way or the other, whoever is available to help edit something can take a look at anyone else's work. And what's nice about it is that it's got versioning. So you can, when someone makes some edits, you can go in and just see highlighted what's been deleted, what's been added, and that sort of thing. It avoids having multiple copies of documents. We are able to push changes and keep in sync and not have any problems with having conflicting copies. Now, we've been using that for quite a while, but with iOS 11, the app has really taken off because what it's done is it's now a file provider that's integrated with the Files app. And what that means is that now we have these repos. I have one for the club, I have one with you, Federico, and I'm on like Ryan's and Jake's and a couple of others. And so I can go into the Files app and I can open that folder and I can get right into those documents and open them. Or I can move them to an archive, or I can delete them or add something to the repo from another app just by dragging and dropping it in and out of the Files app, which is really nice. But what I really like is with Ulysses, because it has support for external files, I can pull in something from working copy, make changes in Ulysses, the app that I'm used to using for doing all my writing. And then when it saves right back into working copy. It's there and ready for whomever's article it is. All I have to do is go back to working copy and do a commit. So it's the thing with drag and drop and a lot of these file provider and other things that have been added to the iPad, I think, is that they're very hard to describe why they feel so much more natural and easy, because they're things you could probably have done in another way before with a share sheet or something like that. But the fact that you can do things by just kind of dragging them in between a Files app and Ulysses or some other text editor just makes it feel, to me, a lot more simple, natural, and it feels like a shortcut, really, that you're getting there a lot easier by using drag and drop. I mean, how do you feel about it, Federico?
I agree, and I was thinking about this today as I was so I needed to paste a link from Safari into Tweetbot, and then I needed to send actually a bunch of tweets with different links to readers who were asking me questions.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was dragging and dropping these links, because Tweetbot now supports iOS 11, I realized that the practical difference wasn't really huge, because before I could just open Tweetbot and Safari in split view and I could just copy and paste, or maybe,
Right.
run some workflow. And so the end result was the same, but now it just feels easier, and it feels nicer to do. It feels more like it was meant to be on iOS, that you just pick up something and you drop it somewhere else and you swipe across the screen and you're done. It just feels like I don't have to go through menus and additional UIs to accomplish what I need to do. I can just touch and drop it somewhere else.
It feels like it should have always been there, right? Because it's one of those things, because when the iPad was introduced, it was all about manipulating the content right on the screen with your fingers. And when you imposed a share sheet or something similar to that, or the pop-up menu for copy and cut and paste, those were intermediary steps that just kind of detached you from what you were trying to accomplish. Like you were saying, taking those links and just pulling them into Tweetbot with an easy drag from one app to the other.
And I feel like I'm not surprised that we've seen a wave of developers and third-party apps adding support for drag and drop, even if basic, like a basic version of drag and drop right now on day one, because it just feels like such a more natural interaction on the iPad, that I actually hope that in the future Apple brings drag and drop between apps to the iPhone. Right now on the iPhone, drag and drop is limited to the app that you're using. You cannot pick up something, hit the home button, go back to the home screen and drop it into another app. That's only possible on the iPad. But it is so good and it makes so much sense on iOS that I hope that Apple brings it to the iPhone. And to get an idea of what it feels like to do drag and drop on the iPhone, I recommend trying Castro, the podcast app that maybe you're using to listen to this very episode. They have added, the developers are super top, support for drag and drop in iOS 11. And drag and drop perfectly matches the nature of Castro, in that from the inbox, you can pick up an episode and drop it into the archive, or drop it into the inbox if you want to listen to it. And then in the inbox, you can also rearrange episodes with drag and drop. And as you move them up and down the list, you feel a haptic feedback on your iPhone, which is super well done. If you see the output in real time, and you also feel the result on your iPhone if you have an iPhone 7 with the Taptic engine. So I'm a big fan of drag and drop. It's the biggest section in my review, And I hope that it's adopted by everyone.
Yeah, I think Castro is probably the best argument out there for having it on the iPhone. The Super Top guys posted on YouTube a video yesterday that we'll put in the show notes that shows the app in action, and it's just so well done between the drag and drop itself and the animations, and as you said, the haptic feedback. It really is nice, and you use that for a little while with Castro, and then you can just imagine what it would be like to take something in one app and move it somewhere else.
So the example that I want to talk about is something a little different. One of the new extension types in iOS 11 is the SMS filtering extension. And these extensions are based on a new API, which is called the Identity Lookup. And think of these as the equivalent for SMS of what Apple did last year with the call blocking extensions. So last year with iOS 10, Apple allowed developers to create extensions that block spam phone calls, and they can block them. They can put like a label on the phone call UI that says this is potential spam. I've been using one of these called Truecaller. I know that also Nomorobo is popular.
Yep,
And
that's the one that I've been using.
yeah, that doesn't work in Italy, so I'm using Truecaller because it's got an international database. And this year with iOS 11, there's a similar extension point that lets you block SMS. Well, actually, not blocking, I should say, but rather automatically filtering them out into a specific view of the Messages app, which is the unknown and junk view. And so until today, the only filtering method for SMS was the built-in Apple one. That is, if a contact is not in your, and a phone number or someone is not in your contact list, it goes into the unknown and junk view. But with iOS 11, Apple is opening up this feature to developers, and they can now write filtering extensions that can use a blacklist or a whitelist to allow certain messages to come through. And the app I've been using is called SMS Shield. And it works with a few languages for now. It supports English and I think Italian and a couple of other ones. I was mostly, of course, interested in the Italian language because I've been trying to give either a fake phone number or a purposely wrong phone number, or even my old one, which is no longer active, to every store, every agency that asks me for a phone number. And if I know it's not really necessary, either I make it up or I give the old one, which is no longer functioning. Right. Because I really despise spam calls and spam SMS messages. Still, I get some of those, either from my local supermarket or the other stores that I visited and that I created a loyalty card. They send me messages with offers, and there's seemingly no way to stop them. So SMS Shield, I like it because it uses machine learning. I think it's a core ML model to figure out what can potentially be spam and what is not spam. And you can create a manual blacklist. You can say specifically block this phone number or block any SMS message that contains these keywords. But then the app tries to figure it out on its own. And it usually does a pretty good job. There are some false positives, but you can learn the app and you can send to the developers an example of an SMS that should not be considered spam. I would still want SMS Shield to have a whitelist feature to say never block this message or never block this sender. But overall, this is a good example of this new feature in iOS 11 that not a lot of people are going to use because SMS spam is not as popular or as widespread as spam calls. Still, if you have this issue, as I do, I recommend checking this out.
Yeah, it's really interesting that they've added that. I don't actually have a problem with SMS spam, crossing my fingers that it doesn't happen soon, but the calls got out of hand in the past year, especially on my cell phone. So I've been using Nomorobo both on my phone and at home because they've got a nice service that works with any kind of VoIP-based phone system. So my home phone has that, and that's actually stopped the phone ringing almost entirely because that's about all the calls we get on our landline anymore. Thanks to Balance for supporting App Stories this week. Balance is a wallet for all the world's currencies and tokens. You may have heard of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and some of the newer ones like Ethereum. There's a lot of buzz around cryptocurrencies and blockchain apps, but not that many people are using them yet. Balance is going to change that. Balance is a beautifully designed Mac app that sits in your menu bar and gives you quick access to all your financial accounts and blockchain balances in one place. It's a one-stop destination. Whether it's the bank down the street or your Bitcoin balance that you want to access, you can do it all from this handy app. There's also an iOS app in the works that's coming soon and will allow you to access your balances from an iPhone or an iPad. Balance has a special offer for App Stories listeners. Just go to bal.money/appstories to claim $2 worth of Ether in a Coinbase account that you can link with Balance and view from your Mac's menu bar. It's a great way to get started with cryptocurrencies and to see just how easy Balance makes it to work with them. Once again, that's bal.money/appstories. There'll be a link in the show notes too. Download Balance today from the Mac App Store. Thanks again to Balance for supporting the show. What should we talk about next? Maybe, what do you think? Todoist?
Yeah, tell me about Todoist. And then I also want to tell you something about task management.
Okay. So Todoist has added both Siri integration because one of the features of iOS 11 is a new Siri intent. There weren't a lot of new Siri intents that were debuted at WWDC this year, but they did include task creation and other things related to task management. So with Todoist now, you can create a task and you can do things like assign it a date. So I could say, record App Stories with Federico tomorrow at 3, and it would add it to Todoist. I can say, show me all my tasks that are due today in Todoist. You have to add that in Todoist or on Todoist or something along those lines to every Siri command. And I've been really impressed with how responsive and fast and accurate it's been. Though I know that some people have had some real problems. I know our friend Mike just can't get it. I think it told him that he wanted to add something to the Tattooist, which was kind of funny. But he's having trouble with it. But I think you and I have had success with it. And so that's been, for me, it was hard to get into the habit of actually adding tasks with Siri because it's just not something that's really ever been an option before with a third-party app. But once I did, it's been really handy to use it. So I've enjoyed that. You can also there's also drag and drop support. It's really just drag in, not drag out. You can't drag a task out. I think that there are issues there that are very similar to email where when you drag out, what are you dragging? Are you dragging just the name of the task? Are you dragging out the due date, the comments, the attachments? What is that? Because it's like an email an email message in the sense that it's a bundle of a whole bunch of different things potentially. But you can now drag in all sorts of things to attach to your task. Like you can drag in files. On iOS before you could attach images, but you couldn't attach just arbitrary files. And now you can attach just about any kind of file. You can do what you can do with just about any other drag and drop supported app, which you can drag in links, you can drag in text, you can drag in all that sort of thing, which is just very handy, especially when you put Todoist side by side on an iPad with, say, an email client, and then you can create tasks straight out of your email by dragging parts of the email message out into Todoist.
What I want to briefly bring up is the fact that I'm impressed with Todoist in iOS 11, the way that they support Siri and drag and drop.
Uh-huh.
But I'm even more impressed with what the Omni group did with OmniFocus, because they have deeper integration with drag and drop. They allow you to drop text and links and file attachments in a bunch of different places in the app, and there's even support for dropping on top of different controls. Like you can drop stuff on top of the plus button to create a new task. You can drop in, and that is also possible in Todoist, but then you can also drop in the forecast view in OmniFocus to assign a task to a specific day. And in terms of SiriKit integration, they support more intents than Todoist. So in addition to letting you create tasks in a project or in the inbox and assign a due date, they have deeper support for search and for marking certain tasks as complete, for example. And that is those are more intense than Todoist. And having those integrations, like better drag and drop and better SiriKit, support has made me feel like, maybe I should give OmniFocus another try. But my problem is that we are so entrenched in the Todoist ecosystem. We use it for collaboration, we use it for automation with the MacStories Storybot on Slack, that switching task managers now would be a serious problem for me, especially in terms of collaboration, because you and I, we assign tasks to each other all the time. But the fact that I keep getting that feeling of OmniFocus has those local automation features like the task paper support and the workflow actions. And now with this drag and drop that is deeper than Todoist, and the SiriKit integration, which is more full-featured and more fleshed out, it makes me look at it with a bit of envy and with a bit of jealousy, honestly.
Yeah, I hear you on that, because I really do like, for instance, that task paper integration, because I do use task paper on my Mac a little bit. I don't use it a lot just because because I'm not using OmniFocus, I don't have a good way to use task paper on iOS. I've never, Taskmater I've tried, but it's never really clicked with me. So once in a while I'll make a list on my Mac, but I don't use it as my primary task manager, mainly because I don't have a good iOS solution at this point. There is a lot of interesting stuff with OmniFocus. I just hope that you don't switch, or don't try to switch, until after I figure out the automation where I'm going to give you gold stars for completing your task.
I mean, exactly. Let's assume hypothetically that I come up to you and I say, John, I've decided to switch back to OmniFocus. Does that mean that you start sending me messages for all the things that I have to do, or that you set up reminders on Slack? Like, at this point, I fear the method that you might choose to assign things to me.
You just know that I'm going to be bothering you more, is what you're saying.
It's not necessarily that. It's more that, in Todoist, at least I know that all your things that you are expecting me to do are in a single place. If you just tell me over text message, that's going to get lost in the conversation eventually. I mean, that's going to happen for sure. So ideally, there will be like a shared OmniFocus app, but that doesn't exist. Or ideally, Todoist would have deeper integrations with all of this, like with the URL schemes, task paper, and Siri, and drag and drop. So I don't know what the solution is, because I'm stuck in the middle of, I want to have this deeper native app to iOS. And if you listen to this show, there's also, this maybe doesn't sound crazy, but I'm constantly trying to come up with excuses to use stuff by the Omni group, because I just like them so much. and also, on the other hand, I need to be able to collaborate. I need a web service. I need the APIs, and I need to have like a space where things don't get lost and where I can integrate it with Slack. So,
yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, I used OmniFocus for a very long time, and I really like the app. I'd have a hard time giving up the collaboration stuff that we use, because you and I use that a lot. It's not for a ton of different things, but it's the kind of thing where it's like, well, Federico has to remember to do X, Y, or Z, and I just throw it in there and it pops up for you, 2 or 3 days later, and we don't have to have a conversation about it on iMessage or something. Thanks to Readle for sponsoring App Stories this week. Today I want to tell you about Readle's award-winning PDF app called PDF Expert for the Mac. This was Readle's first Mac app, and it was named an Apple App of the Year and an Editor's Choice. Over 350,000 people around the world are using it for their PDF needs. PDF Expert can be used for annotating PDFs, things like highlighting text or adding notes or stamps or even shapes. And with PDF Expert, you can fill out forms and sign them too. PDF Expert also includes powerful editing tools that let you actually change the text, add links, and images to a PDF as well. Readle has a special deal for App Stories listeners, $15 off the regular price of the app. That's a 25% savings. Just use the link in the show notes. Thanks again to Readle for supporting the show.
So I want to also mention the latest release by the folks at Black Pixel. They have launched an iOS version, to my surprise, and an iPad version of Kaleidoscope. And Kaleidoscope is a long-time Mac app to run diffs, to run comparisons between images, folders, and text files, to let you see what is different between multiple versions of the same file or the same folder. And to coincide with the release of iOS 11, they have launched this version of Kaleidoscope on iOS, which is a free download with an in-app purchase to unlock the full version after a 2-week trial, I think. And I cannot wait to start using this more. It supports drag and drop, for starters. So you can pick up something in the Files app or somewhere else, like in Working Copy or in email, and you can drop it into Kaleidoscope, and then you can start run the comparison. So to run some tests, I imported my 54,000 word review of iOS 11. It's like, I don't even know how many. It took 2 seconds to load. So
Wow.
basically, you need to double that, because it's 2 files. So 54,000 words by 2 inside Kaleidoscope. And it found all the differences on my iPad Pro in like 2 seconds. So this is a huge text file.
Wow.
And this is going to be handy, I think, because if Working Copy, which is the GitHub client that we use, adds a way to drag out individual commits, so individual versions of an existing file, if the developer adds that option to pick up a version and drag it out, instead of just dragging out the latest version, that means we can take advantage of the best of both worlds. We can have GitHub storage and GitHub sync for multiple versions and Working Copy access. But then we can use the diff tool of Kaleidoscope, which I find superior because it's got a better UI. It allows you to quickly move across changes instead of having to scroll the entire file manually. And it's very well done, of course, because black pixel design, that's synonym of quality. So if Working Copy adds this drag and drop option, this is going to be perfect for me. And I'm going to be using this a ton. Honestly, if this happens, if I can set up this kind of workflow, I can feel that Kaleidoscope is going to be on my annual must-have apps list, because I played with it for 5 minutes and I was like, yeah, this is going to work for me.
Yeah, I have only just barely scratched the surface, probably even less than you, but I immediately was excited because every week when we put together the newsletter, I'm dealing with a bunch of articles that have been written by other people that I haven't really necessarily read. So it might be something Ryan writes that you've edited. So I haven't been involved in that document at all. And with that, I would be able to potentially drag in Ryan's version and your version and really quickly see exactly what's changed and make sure that I have the latest version and that I understand what the changes have been.
Exactly. So I'm really hoping that Working Copy brings more drag options, and I'm confident that Anders, the developer, is very responsive. So I'm sure that it will gain these features, and I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, no, he's constantly putting out new versions, and we've been on the beta for a long time, and that app is iterated faster on than just about any other app that I have on any iOS device, I think.
All right, I would say we pick 2 more apps, 1 each.
All right, I'm going to go with one that maybe some people would think is boring, but I think it's important, which is the iWork suite of apps, because iWork is an Apple suite of productivity apps, and they got a day one update to support drag and drop. And the reason I think it's important that that occurs is that it's both kind of a roadmap for developers to understand how these different new technologies are used. And it kind of shows a commitment internally from Apple that they are behind drag and drop in these apps. And I was using drag and drop a little bit the other day with numbers, and it's really nice. I mean, just dragging in URLs for a list of articles that I've written, or dragging in numbers. You do a calculation in pCalc and you can drag the result in. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. They've also received a few nice little updates, such as there's a lot better tools for creating shapes in all 3 apps, Numbers, Keynote, and Pages. And there's support in Numbers, especially for special keyboards for dates, times, and durations, with these little stepper buttons that sit kind of in the row above the keyboard that allow you to increment time periods that you've entered into a cell. So it just makes for a really fast input of time and duration related input. And then a really nice small feature in Pages, which is you can now triple tap a paragraph and select the whole paragraph, which is something, that kind of shortcut, I wish there was more of that in more text editors. I'm not really a Pages user. I use it a little bit here and there, but I think that feature is really, really useful for anybody who is, a heavy Pages user.
So my final pick, at least for this week, I'm sure we'll revisit this topic because so many apps are coming out.
Yes.
I want to pick Visual Codes by Benjamin Mayo. He writes at 9 to 5 Mac. He's been we've known each other for a long time, and he's put out this new app for iOS 11 that takes advantage of the new QR code APIs in the system. So if you have iOS 11, you can do a bunch of things with QR codes. You can scan them with the Apple system camera. So you just point the camera at a QR code, and you will get like this banner notification coming down from the top of the screen that lets you do stuff with the QR code. So if it's a code that contains a link, you can open the link in Safari. If it's a QR code for a contact, you can add the contact to your address book. You can even expand the notification, so you have a bunch of shortcuts there. So obviously, there's deeper support for QR codes with the camera. Now, I feel like more people are gonna be able to scan QR codes on iPhones because they don't need a third-party app for that. But there's also an API for developers to integrate QR codes with Siri. What you can do is you can assign a personal code to the user. Think of like the messaging services like Facebook Messenger and Snapchat that allow you to share your profile by sharing a profile code, which is easier than sharing a link with people. The idea is you should be able via Siri to invoke your personal code and to say things like, show my messenger code, and the visual code comes up in the Siri UI, and you hand your iPhone over to someone else and you share your profile by sharing the code, which is easier, it's more visual, it's more intuitive. So Benjamin created this app, it's called Visual Codes, that allows you to do two things. It lets you assign a personal code to like a pinned code to invoke via Siri. So that can be your contact list, your contact information. That can be the link to your website or whatever, your phone number. But then you can also create a variety of codes that you can store inside the app and that you can use at any time with friends or family. For example, you can create a location code if you want to share an address, or a code for your Wi-Fi router, like if you want to let friends connect more easily to your home network. You can create really multiple types of QR codes, websites, contacts, text. It's very polished. It's based on the iOS 11 design language. It integrates with Siri, so you can go into the settings and you can say, of all these codes, I want to make this one available via Siri. I've never been really into QR codes because there's never been a simple way to act on them quickly with the iPhone.
Right.
But now with iOS 11, you can just swipe on the lock screen, you open the camera and you scan. And so having visual codes is a nice complement to this kind of more integrated experience in iOS 11.
Yeah, I know. Jake got really excited about the app, and when he wrote his review, he said he's going to just start sticking QR codes to everything in his apartment. So
Perfect. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you can do that, and then everybody label everything. All right, Federico. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks again to our sponsors, Balance and Readle. And we'll talk to everybody next week. We've got a lot of iOS 11 stuff coming up. We're still working on it on the site, and we'll be talking about it here, I'm sure, for many, many weeks to come. So check out our show notes for links from today's episode. As always, you can find Federico and me on MacStories.net and writing for Club MacStories. And Federico is on Twitter. He's at Viticci, that's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees, JOHN VOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.